Okay, cool. Noah, so the very first question that I want to ask you is I want to know what you think about SEO right now. What's the state of SEO like for you right now?
Yeah, great question. So SEO, currently is at a very interesting time. A lot of moving parts, things are changing, especially in the e-commerce space. I mean, if you go and type in a search right now that has e-commerce and buying intent, you're going to notice there's a lot of new SERP features, search engine result features, right, that are showing up. Whether it's different shopping feeds and modules and those things, um, which is impacting. Like even if you're ranking number one, it does impact where that shows up, right? So um, that is something that a lot of brands need to start taking into account, and a lot of SEOs need to start thinking about as well, and taking action on it. And something I'm thinking about also, and how the shopping experience is evolving, and even more deeper than that as well, as far as just the Google experience, right? Is how people are navigating, how they're buying things across different channels, right? Across social media, YouTube, etc. How does that weave into SEO as well, right? So I think we're entering an era where the very best SEOs are not going to be, when they say SEO, it's going to be still about Google, right? Google's not going away. It's still going to be really dominant. But, you know, an added edge is going to be, can I also help think about how we can use whatever we're creating for SEO on Google elsewhere?
Yeah, really interesting points. Um, I know someone who recently bought, they bought like, it was things for the wrist. They've been getting sore wrists, like carpal tunnel and stuff.
Mhm.
And I was asking them about their buyer experience and how they approached it. And they said that they just went straight onto Google and typed in the bottom of funnel keyword, clicked the first site, and then they bought. But when I was speaking to them, they actually started the journey like 8 weeks before. And it started by like Googling the symptoms and like why they were getting sore wrists. And then they went on to, I think, TikTok. And then, I ended up eventually 8 weeks later back on Google, like they typed in a bottom of funnel query.
Right.
And it was only at that point where they obviously bought very quickly.
Yep.
But they completely forgot that they had spent this 8 weeks before until I had brought it up to them. And I think we're going to see, more and more of that. The funnel is non-linear. People spend time across these other platforms.
Yep.
And it was something that the very first podcast guest we had on, Ray Sadiq, spoke about. He spoke about social search. And I know you mentioned some other things there, like the modules and the shopping feeds. So we'll touch on that in a second. But I'm curious, like, are you, how are you keeping up right now? Are you, yeah, are you finding it? There's lots of changes. Are you finding that your strategies are changing a lot? Are you, uh, yeah, I guess, like, are you having lots of questions from clients asking if they should do this? Should they create YouTube videos? Should they rank on
Mhm.
TikTok? Yeah.
Yeah, I get some questions like that from clients. Although, I would also say a majority of them aren't thinking as deeply as that. Like they're not quite sensing the connectivity there, even though they might ask about another channel. Um, and as far as me staying on top of it, I'm sort of in the background doing like lots of research right now, kind of mapping out, how I might tweak the strategy we actually implement and execute as far as like deliverables for our clients go and the strategy, which is a really interesting thing about running an agency, right? Because we have our processes that work right now, and we want them to keep working, right? And then introducing something new, you want to be confident that the new strategy and approach is what's going to knock it out of the park even more, for the client. So right now, I'm kind of doing a lot of analysis and monitoring things to get an understanding of, like, all right, here's how we evolve, how we offer our service right now in its next phase, which hopefully I'll feel confident about rolling out in the next couple months.
Hmm. Okay, that's cool. How do you approach testing and like trialing these new things? So you mentioned the search experience is changing. You have these new shopping feeds, or what was it you mentioned? Sorry, the new modules.
Yeah, there's like, if you type in any sort of like e-commerce related search, right now for a product or whatever, you might see different, like popular products is a newer kind of module, the organic shopping feed along with the paid shopping feed, all those things, and even the shopping tab um, has a new experience that rolled out the past couple of weeks as well on Google, right? So all that stuff is changing, and as far as how you test it and monitor that, usually what I like to do is there's actually new reports and things like that in Search Console, like the merchant feed and those types of things, where I'm looking at that data and saying like, all right, if we do some optimizations for this specific client, like, can we move the needle here or there? And I'll deal with the client where I'm confident, and we'll talk with them as well, obviously, right? Where it's like, hey, we're going to try out this thing, try to impact and influence this particular thing, right? Whether it's the popular products feed or somewhere else. And if we can build a thesis off that working um, with a client who we're killing it for, then we can apply that to other clients who, also need the help.
Hmm. Okay, that's cool. Why don't we dive into low hanging fruit then? So you pick up a new client right now. What are the sort of best low hanging fruit or the best growth strategies for e-commerce brands right now? Yeah, what would you go to?
Yeah, so usually the quickest wins, right, are you're gonna have keywords where you're ranking anywhere from like second all the way down to in the teens or 20s, right? That are ranking, but they could be doing a little bit better, right? And oftentimes there can be things as simple as just rewriting and rewording the meta title and meta description, adding some better internal links, creating some supporting content. There can be some like really easy, quick actions that for those specific keywords make a huge difference. And we kick off campaigns with a action plan that we build out, and part of that is analyzing the current keyword rankings, and we have a scoring system to prioritize. Hey, this keyword has a lot of volume. It's not very difficult to rank for. We're already ranking 11th for it, so we're pretty confident, and it has a lot of it's relevant for the client as well, right? So it has transactional intent, etc. So we build out that scoring system so that way we can say if we take action on this specific page for this keyword right now, we can expect really quick wins as far as improved rankings and then traffic that leads to sales. So really leveraging data there to understand where those quick wins exist.
Okay, that's cool. And if you're working with like an e-commerce website who has a lot of different products, a lot of different maybe categories on that, how do you determine, like, would you just focus on one category for content creation, or will you just chase those low-hanging fruits across the board?
So that's requires a bit of a mixture of looking at data to see where the easier opportunities are to make improvements, but also talking with the client to understand, hey, like you have all these products, right? Like which ones have the best margins for you, which ones you're trying to move more of, that type of thing. So it all requires some communication there, mixed with what our SEO tools and what other tools are telling us um, about the opportunity that's available.
Hmm. And do you get any questions from clients that, if you're creating supporting content, maybe any concerns or like, well, why would we create this supporting content? And maybe just not understand that the customer journey has multiple phases. Are your clients generally more aware of the marketing journey? And if so, like, is there any like common mistakes that you typically see there as well?
Yeah, I mean, on occasion you'll get questions like that, but for the most part, up front when we're doing our initial kind of action plan, they get a good idea of what we mean by supporting content and where that sits and where that ranks. And really, um, the most important thing is like, even though it's supporting content, it still needs to be really relevant and make sense for the brand to even be posting to their website, whether that's adding some copy to a product or collection page, or creating new blog content, right? Any of those things. We just want to make sure it is relevant and makes sense. It is not just like, I don't know, like, yeah, it's going to rank for something and show up and might be a part of um, someone's search journey, but not really um, in alignment with what the brand would be posting. You want to make sure everything makes sense there too.
Hmm. And in terms of like producing the briefs for the content that you have decided is low hanging fruit, how do you go about that?
Yeah, so we have a process right now to where, like I mentioned in that initial action plan we map out, we're mapping out months of content in advance. So we kind of have a lot of topics picked out based off of which collections and products need support, which keyword opportunities exist with those new content opportunities as well. And then from there, we're kind of picking a primary keyword we're focused on, looking at what already exists out there on Google, right? So if we have a keyword we're focusing on for some new blog content, what are the best 5 or 6 examples of that doing, um, and how can we learn from those pages to influence what we want to do to beat them out, basically. And that's a good majority of what we're doing. And then also, when possible, tapping the client for any additional insights and info they might have that they can share to make this the content as unique as possible as well.
Okay, that's cool. And whilst you're doing all this, you're obviously going for these low hanging fruit wins, but how do you balance sort of long term strategy too alongside this?
Yeah, so with that, obviously, there's going to be some keywords that are just harder to rank for, take more time, might need more authority, right? So that's where thinking about backlink building and being strategic and purposeful around there can be helpful. And always just making sure not to get lazy and checking in on your data and progress, right? It can be easy to hyper focus on those early quick wins, and then losing the target on those longer term items, right? So with all of our reporting we provide our clients and touch base points we have with them, and I'm in Ahrefs and Google Search Console all the time looking at stuff and trends and data and everything like that, with our progress. So really it just takes making a dedicated habit of keeping your eye on those longer term goals, and then every couple of months analyzing, all right, what progress has been made. Have there any changes that have made that have positively or negatively impacted that? Like, just staying on top of that stuff, and then adjusting as needed, to keep pushing the needle forward.
Okay, that's cool. And when obviously you're producing the content for these longer term goals, um, have you found any sort of like wins or quick wins that you can get on that front on other channels, or even if it's not something you specifically do, have you saw any brands that you work with maybe take that content, syndicate it to social media or TikTok, and at least try and bring in some early sales from it that way?
So, I probably have seen some brands do that. I don't know if too many of my clients are currently doing that, but that is something I'm thinking about quite a lot right now, as far as like recommendations. And with that, it does get a little more complicated because a brand also needs to have the infrastructure to repurpose that content and reuse it, right? But that is a thing where I can certainly imagine, and not in like I know people have done this before, where it's like, all right, we made a blog post and now we're going to make this like really cheesy Instagram or Facebook post, or whatever it is, right? And it's like, that's not really helpful, right? But how can we creatively take some aspect of that post? It's that instead of just being like, hey, look at us, we made a blog post, go to click on it, right? It's like, how can we take a section of that maybe and turn it into something more interesting, right? Whether it's a video or something else. That I think would be, I would encourage brands to think about that moving forward. And it's something I'm thinking about a lot as far as how I'm going to start consulting brands, that have the bandwidth to do things like that.
Yeah, there's people like Andrew Holland who's talking about things like, I think he put on his LinkedIn, be searched for, not just found through search. How do you interpret that, and do you agree?
Yeah, I mean, I would certainly like to see the specific context he's saying that in, but my interpretation of your phrasing there, ties back to a concept that's been around for a while. I think Rand Fishkin has used this quite a bit, from who was originally at Moz. The idea of brand demand, right? So like, you want a brand that's in demand, and it's always helpful when people are searching for your brand name, right? Obviously, a a first like baseline SEO thing is, if people search for you, can they find you, right? But you also want people like talking about you, right? Is your product awesome? Like, and then they're seeking you out specifically. That's really important. Kind of adjacent to that is also, do people actually want your products or the type of product you offer? Do people just naturally search for the product, the solution your product offers? That's also an important thing for any brand to consider, especially new brands that are starting out. I think a really difficult thing for a lot of direct to consumer brands is that they might have a product that, it could be an awesome product, the brand could be cool, but whatever you call like the thing, like whatever it is not a thing that's searched very heavily, right? So no one's going on to Google or anywhere and be like, how do I, do this thing or do that. They don't even know that there's a solution out there, or that they need to be looking for this product, right? So those are the brands where they have, I would say, like the hardest time establishing themselves, because it's like they have to introduce themselves to everybody and also explain what problem they're solving, right? As far as a brand
Yeah.
goes, or what, obviously some brands just evoke a feeling or a vibe or whatever, right, too, that people just get into as well. Whereas I work with some furniture brands, right, and people are always buying furniture, right? It's not hard. Like, you're gonna have demand for that, whether they know it's you or somebody else. So yeah, hope that answers your question there.
Yeah, no, it does. And those cases where, it's a bit more obscure product, it doesn't have a lot of volume, but it could have volume. How would you approach that? Yeah, how would you approach it?
Yeah, so I mean, in the most extreme cases, I would say, a lot of brands like that, it might be worthwhile to invest in some brand focused SEO early on, right? Like, to just be established, so that way when someone hears about the brand and they go to Google to search for you, they find you. You want to establish that for sure. Um, but then, a super longer term like SEO play that, many of the brands that have more searchable terms tied to them early on, that might actually not make as much sense for a brand like that. They might want to focus more on paid advertising and video content and social media channels. And then once their kind of niche becomes more mature and established, and there's more questions being asked, and more search terms that are out there, um, doing a more kind of standard comprehensive approach to SEO might make more sense.
Yeah, that's interesting. When you're approaching clients like this, so when clients come to you and you're looking at the audit for them, you're planning the content strategy for them, what did your process look like for doing research into the customer and their pain points and their problems and what they want? How do you approach that?
Yeah, great question. So when we kick off things with a client, we have a usually at least an hour long kickoff call where we're diving into a lot of questions like that. Like, just tell us about your customer. When they wind up buying something from you, what are the features and benefits? Like, what are those things that really push them over the edge? So we can start to gain an understanding of that as well. And then beyond that, in our keyword research phase and content planning phase of our initial kind of audit and action plan, think about like content buckets is like a thing I like to think about. Whereas, what are the different both direct ideas, right? So like the things that are very obvious, like these different sections of content, types of content, or content topics that are like kind of parent level, that are very obvious on the surface level. Like, those are going to be easy to find, but then and think about. But then, what are also some adjacent ideas, to what someone is searching for, right? So, for example, yeah, I mentioned some furniture brand clients earlier, right? Like, yeah, certainly there might be, if you're selling certain types of tables or whatever, right? There's going to be questions people are asking about tables, right? But there also might be questions someone is asking about, how do I make my living space, more efficient, or easier to manage? Like, there's adjacent topics as well. So it's a combination of approaching keyword research and content planning in that way, and the content strategy in that way, where you're not just focused on the kind of direct, easy to think about keyword opportunities, and then also just really, interviewing the client in a way that allows us to gain an understanding, because they're the experts, right? They've um, been running their business in most cases for many years, so they have a really strong idea of what um, their customer likes, why they like them, all that. So we leverage that quite a bit.
Okay, sweet. And I guess the next question is, how do you manage the production of the content, and how do you pass over that information that you've gathered in the research phase to the writer?
Yes, we built out a mini brief right now, and basically, and we're my content pal client. We work with you guys. You guys have been fantastic, um, and really just about providing a brief where there's enough background and information and details to where hopefully there's not as much research needed. There's a foundation built. We give perspective on, like, hey, here's how this fits into. I always like to add some notes on, like, the client offers this product. here's how this piece kind of fits into or ties back to that product, right? Because the blog content, needs to, in some ways, indoctrinate, or like the movie Inception, like putting dropping that like that idea in their head, right? Of like, okay, like I'm reading about this blog post, but it's also making me consider the purchase even more than I was previously. So just trying to tie in those ideas, and providing really good examples of competitor pieces that sometimes aren't always obvious that they're hitting the mark in the way that we want to, as well. So just doing all that prep so that way the content team has exactly what they need to produce um, what we're looking for. And yeah, I mean, the partnership on a content front with you guys has been unbelievably good. The content performs so well. All the ideas and info and stuff that I provide you guys gets implemented perfectly. So it's been, yeah, great to work with you guys.
Love to hear it. It's a great partnership. But I think it comes, the brief plays a big part. I think a lot of people who use agencies like My Content Pal, they think it's like I can just pay for this subscription or these pack of words and then forget about it. And often it's like you need to have a collaborative relationship. You need to, get good briefs. And I always say the first few articles are like the training part where we have to bridge the gap between your expectations or the client's expectations and then our experience, and there's like a bit of startup time there as well. And if you put in the work early on in the beginning, it pays off dividends for the entire campaign. So you were always really really good with that, giving feedback and giving briefs, and the briefs were great, so that helps. And it's actually not just like it's like more co-writing really, in a way. The first 10% you're doing the briefs, the next 80% we all go and do the research, the writing, etc. And then that last 10%, I know that you're given that professional oversight on the client's behalf. And that's why it's such a good partnership, I think. And I think a lot of agencies miss that, and people cheap out on content. I know right now there are so many agencies that are mass producing AI content and putting it on these e-commerce sites. They're producing like very thin content for maybe 20 variations of a keyword for a specific SKU, and it's low quality and spammy to me. And sometimes it works, and sometimes only works for a short amount of time.
Yeah.
But more often than not, you're just polluting the web. And I think a lot of these e-commerce owners as well, none you work with, but a lot of them out there are falling into the trap of these AI writing tools. And
Yeah.
yeah, they don't truly understand what goes into good content. Can you speak a little bit about that? Maybe just your thoughts on AI content and thoughts on the value of good content.
Certainly, yeah. I've strayed away from leveraging AI content. I mean, I will use Chat GPT and these things for as a second brain, as I call it sometimes, right? When I'm trying to brainstorm things. But as far as actually producing content, obviously we're partnered together um, on that front. And I just like, from what I've seen when I've tested out some of these tools, like just what gets output, I'd rather just have it be written by a real person, especially handing off to a client, and wanting it to come across in a way that is achieving the result, that we actually want. And certainly I follow, some SEOs that leverage AI tools, and they're doing it, in some ways successfully, but those are for their specific instances. It's not always necessarily for an e-commerce client or something like that. And I know many other e-commerce SEO agencies that are still leveraging human writing because it just, I don't know, it just seems to perform better and work better, and is, I would say, a little more ethical too, because you never kind of know where, we've seen what Google's done in the past year and a half plus with managing that. I'd rather just stay on the safe side of things, where I'm confident the content's going to be strong, well written, achieve the goal we want, and not really leave us in a gray area where we're like, are we going to get our wrists slapped or not? From Google if they change their mind on something, right? So to me, long term, it's you're building your brand, and so you want your content to really knock it out of the park. And to add on to that as well, what I really like about working with your team, what I find is really hard to find, is people underestimate the the balance of understanding search and understanding keywords and how to provide someone the right information to then turn that into a proper blog post or whatever piece of content it needs to be that performs. And having the ability to convey that information and also someone who can receive it is like really hard to find and really hard to build that kind of cohesion and flow with. And yeah, we've been able to do that really well. And you can see it in the performance of the content and how our clients are killing it right now. So yeah.
Yeah, it's awesome to hear. No, we put a lot of work into that. The structure of the page is so important, and I think a lot of people get carried away. It always amazes me how many writers don't understand search intent, but we'll go on. We'll move on. Yeah, let's talk briefly about internal linking. So, yeah, can you tell me about how you approach internal linking? And then are there any quick tips that maybe there's an e-commerce founder listening that they can, go away and implement on their own on internal linking?
Yeah, certainly. So the like easiest way to understand internal linking is that your blog post can be your website can be connected in a variety of ways, right? Your main navigation helps you do that in some aspects. Um, but within your content, right? Let's say you have a blog post that talks about a certain product, category of products you carry, right? Adding links from specific phrases within that content to those collection or category pages or to the specific products helps connect the dots for Google as to how pieces of content are related and how those things connect across your website. And I believe I still spend a lot of time thinking about, okay, how are we going to do this? And I have different tools I use to think about internal linking. But I believe it was Cyrus Shepard. It's in the past year or so. If you're an SEO, you should know who he is. But he posted I don't know if it was his study he did or if he shared someone else's, but it was basically an analysis of like, can you do too much internal linking like to a page or whatever? And the truth is you kind of can't, at least is from, what we've seen in recent years. So really like keyword rich internal links to the right pages. That's the strategy. And in some cases, if you do it right, like there have been times where I go and add 4, 5, 6 internal links with the right keyword phrases from a handful of blog posts to a collection page or product page, whatever it is. And within, 24 hours or a week, you might see some pretty significant keyword rankings, improvements, right? So as far as, recommendations for any brands out there, obviously, you might not have the SEO expertise, but at the very least, like just look at the content you have, try to add some links to your collections and product pages from your blog content in a way that makes sense to you. And you should see some added performance, on Google and elsewhere.
Yeah, I've saw that study, and I'll put the link in the description because it was a really good study. It was by Cyrus, and it's I used to follow the reverse silo method, and in some cases we follow that generally, but when I saw that study, it sort of changed how I approached internal linking, but it also got me thinking. I think a lot of SEOs. I've saw some ridiculous internal linking before, but isn't relevant, and people just add them in because there's a nice anchor text that they can use, but it's really not relevant, and it disrupts the flow for the reader. So I wanted to know from you, like, how do you balance that? How do you make sure that um, you're actually keeping people on site and not just distracting them? Do you have any tips around that?
Well, yeah. So with a majority of my clients, right, most of the the internal links keep you on the site, right? So you're not really um, going elsewhere. If you are adding any external links to other websites out there, one basic thing you want to make sure you do is have that open in a new tab, new tab in the browser. Target blank on your links for anyone who's familiar with that. But really just, yeah, try to make it as natural as possible, right? So you're not getting people jumping from page to page too much, give them the space to read everything. As anything goes, make it as natural as possible, feeling and looking, so that way it's a seamless experience. If you have a paragraph with like I don't know, 6 or 7 links in it, it might be a little overwhelming and not easy to read, especially because most sites have their links, in a fancy color, bolded up or whatever, so they stand out. So you just want to provide a good user experience. At the end of the day, as SEOs and website owners and whatever else your role is, like providing a solid user experience is really all we're doing, right? We're trying to make it as easy as possible for the customers.
Yeah, cool. Okay, love that. Okay, cool. I want to move on to a case study that I watched of yours. It was about Ruggable. So you put up a very good video. I think it was someone else's podcast actually, where you were explaining the tactics on that site. You mentioned content kind of keyword cannibalization, and I wanted to, I guess, just ask you, like, what are some of the most common cannibalization mistakes that you see e-commerce brands make?
Yeah, that's a great question. So cannibalization affects a lot of brands out there. Um, and the biggest thing, this is where like something as simple as your strategy with your meta titles, like and your URL structures, um, and the blog content you create, right? Once you get over a certain threshold of how many pages you have on your site, it can get really easy to have those pages competing with each other, right? So cannibalization is basically you have, this page about this collection and then this blog post about something similar. And maybe you have 2 or 3 other blog posts that you thought were different, but Google's actually kind of understanding them in a similar way. And so all 3 or 4 or 5 of those pages are now Google's confused. Which one do we want to actually rank for this keyword? Which one do we not? And so you'll see if you go onto Ahrefs or any one of the tools you use that your pages are fluctuating in and out with their rankings, and Google's switching these pages back and forth quite a bit because it can't make a decision on what's the right choice for the user. um, and so really what you want to do there is when you, first of all, you want to use your SEO tools appropriately to find those opportunities, right, where you have cannibalization, which is something we look at when we do our initial action plan when we're reviewing sites along the way as we're working with clients. And then getting an understanding of intent is really important as well, right? So that's the easy way when you're approaching with the right intent. You're going to make it's going to be easier to separate your collection pages and products pages from your more informational content on your blog posts, as well. So all that stuff needs to be put into consideration, um, and really being consistent with, all right, I've chosen this like primary keyword topic for this page as like our main focus. And like, if you're going to approach that topic on a blog post or elsewhere, it can't be the exact same phrase, right? It needs to be a variation, that is clearly the focus of that page. So that way you have that separation and you're not going to have that cannibalization.
Hmm. Let's say you've made a mistake. Let's say you've realized, okay, actually these pages are cannibalizing each other, and one needs to go. Like, what's the best way to approach that?
Right. So the first thing you want to do there is look at all the pages that are cannibalizing. Ahrefs has a great report for this. You can there's a little tab you can push down, and it shows you all the pages that are currently from your site trying to rank for um, that keyword phrase. Look at all those pages, right? I usually put them into a Google sheet, right? So I have them all, in a row, and then I just analyze the content. Is anything here like in general, like historically, has it not performed at all? Can we just like delete it, right? Is there anything that we can just get rid of? That can be a place to start. After you ask that question, right, whether there is or isn't something to delete, um, where is the keyword alignment here, right? Is there like something so obvious in one of the meta titles where just the positioning or phrasing of the language needs to be updated to just make it more clear? Are there internal links with the wrong keyword phrases pointing to the wrong pages, or that should be pointing elsewhere? A different phrase should be used, maybe. Those little things, and again, this is where like that sounds really easy to do, and in some cases it isn't, but there is an art and science to that, thinking and understanding how all those things connect and influence uh, what's Google going to choose and not going to choose. And then you also, I use SEO testing quite a bit. I don't know if you're familiar with that tool or not.
Yeah, I've
Um,
used it.
yeah, but that tool is great for like, all right, I made this change, right? And it just grabs your Google Search Console data for you and lets you understand, all right, I made a change. I'm going to log a test. We're going to analyze the previous, 4 weeks of data versus the next 4 weeks. Let's see where we're at, and we have definitive data, on whether we improved or not. And then one thing that me and my team do is we log all of our changes in extreme detail, right? So if I make some changes and we log that test, and we find out, hey, the test did not go at all how we wanted it to go, we know exactly how we can revert it to get back to where we were, and then make a new hypothesis and changes from there.
No, that's cool. I really like that. Taking note of the change and being very, I guess, detailed about it. It's so important. I think you can get tripped up in SEO very easily by, tweaking something. You see it all the time after an algorithm update. People just go and tweak everything. And yeah, it just trips a lot of SEOs up. So that's a really good point. I want to move on, just conscious of time. One last question. You mentioned on the Ruggable case study, you mentioned that the blog hadn't been updated in months. So I wanted to ask you, like, how important is content creation cadence? So like how important is the cadence for producing new blogs in today's SEO landscape for e-commerce sites?
Yeah, sure. And then one note too with the Ruggable thing, that was actually we were doing kind of a live analysis of the site. They were a client I was going after, but they did not actually work with me yet. So Ruggable, if you're out there, I'd just like to work with you. But yeah, great question. So I do find that, most SEOs, you've probably heard this before if you do SEO or you're involved with it. Google does tend to like fresh content. They want to know you're providing, fresh value to clients. You're an active website, right? So even doing, it's a handful of blog posts per month at minimum is a great place to start. And, if you haven't published anything in, months or, a year even, right? Like you do kind of fall through the wayside. And in addition to that, the concept of content decay, right? You may have had blog posts that were killing it for you, and they no longer are, right? So certainly the situations where you can feel like you're running out of things to write about. And oftentimes when you reach that point, a great next step is to go back and look at, all right, like which pieces of content used to kill it. They're still doing okay, but like maybe we lost a lot of ground here or there. They need a rewrite. Information's out of date. We need to do a fresh perspective on this, right? So you really shouldn't be running out of ideas, in that way too often, right? Because if you're in it long enough, there's going to be stuff to go back and fix, new information that comes out, new things that customers and people are looking for and they want. So really, yeah, it's just a way. Obviously, you don't want to just, push out content that isn't very helpful, right? So don't just publish blog posts to publish them. That's actually going to hurt you worse as well. You create kind of dead weight there with your blog content. But yeah, fresh, valuable content that performs, like you're just adding valuable pages to the web, and Google tends to reward that.
Very cool. Okay, sweet. Let's last 10 minutes, I would love to just talk to you briefly about your marketing. It's definitely caught my attention. And how you're on, multiple channels and you're still producing these great results for your clients. So, it's a lot to juggle. So I want to know how you approach content strategy for your brand. And then I also want to know how you juggle the bandwidth around that too.
Yeah, well, the bandwidth part of it is I'm not very consistent with it, so that'll I would like to be more consistent than I am, but when I am most consistent, when I get the best output. So like you mentioned some of the short form stuff I've done. I actually have a guy I met networking locally. I'm in Baltimore, and you should network locally wherever you are because people get stuck online too much. But he actually has a whole like video setup, podcast setup at his office. And so he's, the short form videos I've done a couple sessions with him where we just go and knock out, 10 videos, 10 ideas, and those can be helpful. So batching your content like that can be super helpful. Lately, one thing I've been trying to do is like, I'll make a YouTube video that can be broken down into, tweets and LinkedIn posts, but the one video can be like multiple iterations, right? So it's not just like one piece of content on each platform. It can be used, different sections can be used to create multiple posts. So thinking about your content in a way to where one effort produces a lot of different posts across all your channels, and understanding what performs across those channels. is the most helpful. And really, like, I'll shout out the cold email wizard Daniel Fazio a bit here, because I've you know consulted with him, paid him and his crew for their help over the years, here and there at Client Ascension and all that. And you really do find that when you are consistently putting yourself out on multiple channels, like, clients are seeing you across all those things, right? Like, I've had YouTube videos that have had like 10 views, and someone's found the video and closed on a one call close with me. You know what I mean? So a lot of times, like, it can feel like no one's paying attention or watching, but you really do, like, when someone's looking for who they want to work with, like, they're hot. They're not just going to your website. They're going to YouTube. They're going to LinkedIn. They're going to Twitter, or X, whatever you want to call it. And yeah, they're in all those spots making a decision. And if you look at yourself and think about, how you search for any vendors or services you want to use, like, you do the same thing. You just you're not aware of it, and you kind of assume, a lot of people assume that the same thing isn't happening to them when someone's choosing to work with them.
Yeah, yeah, no, for sure. Google came out with, I think it was just like a report, and the report was called the 7114 report. I'm probably butchering this, but essentially said that before someone makes a purchase, they have to spend 7 hours with you, 11 different touch points across 4 locations. And you're sort of doing that. So you're saying you're not consistent, but you are on LinkedIn, you are on Twitter,
Yeah.
you are doing YouTube videos. So the YouTube videos are great, I think, as well. And the one thing that you're really good at doing is sharing all of the wins you get and the client feedback and stuff. I think that's goes a long way. So you have this like top of funnel short form content that answers these pain points, and then you also have the wins and the trust and the social signals to back it up.
Yep.
So I thought that was quite cool, and so I wanted to speak to you about it. So the short form video, that's not your setup. Is that
No.
the friend
Yeah.
you met?
Yeah,
Interesting.
I met, and he gives me a pretty good price.
Yeah,
Not cheap, but affordable. So,
that's
yeah.
cool.
And
I thought
he's
you had this high tech setup. I was
oh,
like,
no,
oh,
no, no,
he's a
none of
pro.
mine. But yeah, I do have a camera and stuff, but not that whole setup. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's very professional looking. The production value is definitely it goes a long way, I think, too, especially in shorts. Or at least that's what it looks like to
Yeah,
me.
the first iteration of those, when I first did those, literally the first week I posted, I think I closed 3 deals like within a week. And I think it was
Wow.
noticeable, like, the way people viewed me completely flipped just because of the professionalism of the quality. Yeah.
Yeah, you're making me want to go and do shorts now. But how did you think of the ideas? How did you come up with the ideas for the shorts? Is it just questions clients have asked you for so long? I guess you're just so close to it.
Yeah, lots of questions that clients have asked and that people generally kind of ask. Some of them were like case study oriented too. Um, and in some cases, like, it's a short video, right? You can't get through too much, in 15, 20, 30 seconds. So just thinking about, like, how to present some valuable information in short little snippets that at least get you in front of people and make you stand out and keep you top of mind. So that's really the approach there.
That's cool. Okay, cool. Yeah, no, I noticed it. Very, very cool. Okay, sweet. Well, I really enjoyed this podcast. Thank you very much for coming on. Where can the audience find you? Where's the best place to find you?
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, thanks for having me. You can check out my website, workwithnoah.com. You can also find me on Twitter or X at Noah's 4 cents, the number 4. And then I'm on LinkedIn as well. Those are probably the three best spots to hit me up. Noah Kain, Kain, his last name, there as well. So yeah, thanks for having me.